Good morning, everyone. I am Aaron Blumberg, Swiftland's Continuing Education Coordinator, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to Setting Priorities in Copy Cataloging. We have a wonderful learning opportunity ready for you this morning with Maureen McCrory. Maureen McCrory has an MLIS and a PhD and was a catalog librarian and reference librarian over Oberon College from 1995 to 2000 and has been a technical services librarian at Hillsdale College for the past 16 years. Her responsibilities at Hillsdale for all of those years have included the supervision of acquisitions, collection development, and cataloging of all monographic and AV material, as well as the management of the library's innovative ILS. On her time off from Hillsdale, Maureen teaches a course in knowledge organization for Dominican University. Please welcome Maureen and enjoy her webinar this morning.
Thanks very much, Aaron. I hope everybody can hear me. Please, if you have any audio problems, please go ahead and enter them in the chat window, and Aaron will tell me what to do, I'm sure. Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to do this. I'm going to fess up right off. I've never done a webinar. I teach this online course for Dominican, taught that for about 5 semesters now, and I do something like this, so an hour-long session every week. And so I've done this kind of thing, but I've never done a webinar with fellow practitioners, with my colleagues. And so I'm excited to do this, and I look forward to your feedback. I want this to be kind of a conversation about copy cataloging. I happen to know that several of you at least have at least as much experience as I do and probably could give this presentation better than I can. So I'm excited to have this as kind of a dialogue and discuss copy cataloging and just to give you my take in kind of a few decades now, well, a couple of decades at least, of copy cataloging, what I've learned and what I've taken away from best practice in it. I want to start out, and I've never done a poll either, but I'm going to try this. I set up a couple of polls with Aaron's help. I want to start out with, let's see, I want to start out with this question and see if you can answer this poll. Thank you, Aaron. So the question is, are you currently responsible for copy cataloging or do you supervise it? And that should say perform copy cataloging as the first question, or do you supervise copy cataloging or do you do neither? So just get a quick, I'm not sure how many, oh, we have 26 participants. So I'm going to give everybody a second to answer that. So it looks like most people actually do copy cataloging, so that is very good to know. So we have about 71% do copy cataloging, and then a little bit of variety with the other people. I also want to say too, thank you for answering that. As we go through these, please feel free to enter questions or comments in the chat, and I will try to keep up with those. That is something I use a different kind of system when I teach at Dominican, but I'm used to taking questions and comments during the presentation. So feel free to do that if you feel like it, and I'll try to have a little bit of time at the end for questions too. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. Thank you very much. Let's see. So I want to, how do I close this, Aaron? Oh, thank you. Okay, so setting priorities in copy cataloging is my topic today, and I need to go to the next slide. There we go. I have a few goals written out for this. I want to define copy cataloging and its history, just so that we're all on the same page and make sure we're all talking about the same thing. I want to describe what constitutes a match to the item you're cataloging. This, to me, is the focus of copy cataloging, making sure you're using the right record for what you're cataloging. That's where most of the errors in copy cataloging come from, and most of the problems in shared databases come from. So I want to spend a lot of time on that. Identify areas of the bibliographic record that can be changed. So if you do find a record, what you can change, and it kind of depends on how you're going to be using that record. So we're going to talk about that. I want to explore steps for dealing with less than great copy, something we've all seen if we've done copy cataloging. Not all bibliographic records are created equally. Need to figure out how to deal with the ones that aren't really what we hoped they would be. I want to discuss the application of local practice and local notes. This is another thing that I think is a key point, because we all have local practices, and we have notes that we only add locally that our library requires, but other libraries don't. So I want to discuss how you go about doing that. And I want to provide a starter list of priorities for copy cataloging workflows. Again, this is just kind of from my experience as a copy cataloger, and your mileage may vary. You all have different experiences, but I just want to give my take on it. So let's see. Um, this slide describes my copy cataloging life, how I got to this point where I have a lot of experience in copy cataloging. So this is kind of a summary of my CV as it relates to copy cataloging. My first experience working on a library was as a student assistant in grad school in the late 80s, but I wasn't doing cataloging. I didn't start that until I got a job at the University of Michigan in 1990. My first job there was in room 100 at the University of Michigan. It was this huge room. It was probably more than 100 people in this one room, all doing cataloging of various sorts. I think there were about 10 units working in this one room. It was huge number of people all doing cataloging. It was actually pretty quiet because everybody was cataloging, everybody was busy, but that was an interesting first experience in cataloging. I did database searching and inputting, and so I didn't do the copy cataloging, but I input the records that other catalogers had created, and I did some authority checks, although not a lot. That was a separate unit that did most of the authority control. After that, I worked as a technical library assistant at the University of Michigan, where I actually did copy cataloging and shelf listing, making sure the call numbers that we were using fit with the call numbers we were already using. And I also did some series authority work, and that's really what got me interested in librarianship as a profession, because the way series are constructed by publishers and how libraries record that just fascinated me. I don't do series work, but the authority work itself was just fascinating to me. Um, when I was my first professional job was at Oberlin Conservatory in the library doing recon cataloging of music scores. It was a grant-funded one-year position that kind of morphed into a 5-year position doing some reference as well and some complex copy cataloging of other materials. But my main job was taking printed card cataloging and turning it into MARC cataloging, mostly just matching that up to existing records in OCLC, but also doing some other kind of copy cataloging and a little bit of recon cataloging. So recon cataloging is retrospective conversion, and that's the process. You don't hear the term so much anymore since most of it is done, but it was the process by which card catalogs turned into online catalogs. The process of turning printed cataloging into MARC cataloging, basically. And we called it recon. And yeah, I haven't heard that term in a long time. It was common parlance in the library world in the 90s, but it's kind of not necessary terminology anymore, I guess. Um, let's see, I had another poll. Let's see, I wanted to do so obviously I've worked mostly uh, at academic libraries throughout my career. Um, I wanted to see what kind of at what kind of libraries are you all working? Just a quick poll on that, just so I have a sense. We're probably pretty well distributed between academic and public, with a few other libraries thrown in, just kind of based on, I know the consortium that we're part of in Michigan, that kind of is the makeup of the group. And so I kind of guessing this is going to be evenly split, but it'd be interesting to see. Okay, I think that's everybody. So yeah, pretty evenly split between academic and public, and a few special. So thank you very much for that. Erin, can you close that? I'm not sure how to do it. Thank you very much. Okay. And so now at my current job, as Erin said, I supervise a lot of copy cataloging, and I still do copy cataloging of scores and CDs, mostly just to keep my hand in the music cataloging, since that's how I got into this whole business in the first place. I was a music major, and so that kind of was going to be my focus. But also just because that's my expertise, and so I do that copy cataloging still. So here's my little slide about definitions of copy cataloging. The first two are from textbooks, and the last one is my only slightly different take on the definition. Chan and Salaba. This is the new cataloging and classification edition textbook that just came out last year. The process of adapting an existing catalog record prepared by another library or agency. Pretty straightforward. Um, Taylor and Judry's definition in their Organization of Information text from 2009 is only slightly different. The process of adapting for use in a catalog, a copy of the original cataloging created by another library. And so they specify copy and original cataloging. I would say that copy cataloging is a little broader than that because the copy you're using may actually have been another library's copy of another library. And so they're uh, cataloging copy evolves. Basically, it's probably not quite the right word, but it changes. It becomes better. The more libraries that use a record, pretty much the better that library that record becomes. And so my definition of copy cataloging is downloading or copying a bibliographic record created by another library or agency for use in your own catalog. So we're talking about creating these silos of our own catalog. That's one of our problems in cataloging right now, but that's what we're doing with copy cataloging. We're taking a record that exists one place and putting it into the place where we can use it in our own library. Just a kind of a brief history of copy cataloging in the modern era. Uh, and this, when we talk about shared cataloging and cooperative cataloging, that basically is copy cataloging. It kind of is all of a piece. But Library of Congress card program started in 1902. You could buy the cataloging that the Library of Congress had already done. For most libraries, this covered most of what they were cataloging. There were always a few exceptions where you had to create your own cards, but you could order cards for most of what you needed to catalog from the Library of Congress. OCLC started doing something similar. The MARC record, of course, was developed in the late 60s, and OCLC pretty quickly kind of glommed onto that development. Started the Ohio Cooperative Library Center, which became the Online Computer Library Center, I believe, in 1971. An online shared cataloging system that produced cards. So you would use these MARC records. You would either create them or add your holdings to these MARC records, and then you could order cards based on those MARC records. And a lot of libraries did that. Our library did it from the mid 70s until the mid 90s when we started using just an online catalog. And that continued. That card production continued until just a couple of years ago when OCLC finally had to quit. Not enough libraries were using it. The Arlen Shared Cataloging Database, when I was working at the University of Michigan, this was a major source for cataloging copy. Arlen was created by the Research Libraries Group in 1980, so it was very much an academic collection of records. If you couldn't find a record in an academic library in OCLC, frequently you would search the Arlen database because some of the more esoteric academic library only type of materials you could find in the Arlen database. There were a couple of other regional and commercial cooperative shared cataloging projects. The big one that I remembered was WLN, which I believe started out as the Washington Library Network and became the Western Library Network. I believe I could be a little bit off on that terminology, but it was another big shared database that eventually merged with OCLC, and OCLC really is the big one now. There are some other sources for copying, but that's kind of the history of copy cataloging. As I said, please feel free to jump in if you know more history than I'm forgetting. Anything you see needs to be added to any of these, please feel free to jump in. So the current popular sources for cataloging copy include WorldCat, OCLC's WorldCat. The big OCLC database now is called WorldCat. Drawback with OCLC is that you have to be a member to use those records. And it's not that cheap. A lot of libraries, OCLC is just cost prohibitive. Something I think OCLC needs to work on. I think it would be a much stronger database if all libraries could participate in one way or another. Yes, the slides are going to be available. Sound is going on and off. I'm not sure what to do about that. Aaron, if you have any thoughts on that, let me know. I'll try to just speak clearly. That might help. Um, so yeah, with OCLC, you have to be a member to use those records. And it's true also for innovative interfaces. Sky River. Sky River was developed specifically to be an alternative to OCLC's WorldCat, but it really is just meant for cataloging. It's not meant for resource sharing. It's not meant for public use. It's just meant for copy cataloging, for sources of cataloging copy, as a source of cataloging copy. Again, it's a subscribed system. You have to pay to use it, but it might be a little cheaper than using OCLC if you're only interested in OCLC as getting that cataloging copy. Library of Congress records are free, but they might not include everything that you need to catalog. The Library of Congress does catalog a ton of stuff, of course, but not everything that's published in the U.S. by any means at this point. So, oh dear, I can hear almost everything. I wish everybody could hear everything. I'm going to try to speak a little more clearly. I think that might help. And yes, the recording and the slides are going to be available, I believe. Okay, so you could use Library of Congress as a source for cataloging copy, but you might be missing some things. You can use cataloging from other libraries. You just need to make sure that the library that you're borrowing the cataloging from is amenable to that, is agreeable to that. I found online when I was Googling information about this great statement on record sharing. I thought it really covered the ethical points about using cataloging from other libraries pretty well. So that's worth taking a look at if you're interested. And so I think I did at this point, I wanted to ask my last poll. Let me get that up here. What is your library's primary source for copy cataloging? Do you use OCLC? Do you use Sky River? Oh, 100% so far. Or some other system. And if you don't know what source, you can always answer just other. Okay, wow. So that's everybody. Thank you very much. So almost everybody is using OCLC. I think, well, that's almost everybody has answered that. Yeah. Thank you very much. Useful information. So that's good because most of my examples come from, oh, thanks, Marla. Yeah. Most of my examples do come from OCLC, but I think it's applicable if you use something else. A few special considerations. If you are adding your holdings to a shared catalog like OCLC, if you're using that record and marking your holdings in OCLC to say that, yes, my library has this item, you need to follow the rules for matching those existing records for that database that are provided by that database or by that agency that manages the database. OCLCs are at this link in their bibliographic formats and standards document. I use that all the time, every day. In fact, this page I use on a very regular basis to make sure that what we're calling a match is what OCLC would call a match. If you're just using records from another catalog, and I think maybe that doesn't apply to well, it applies to a few of us here today, but you can take a record and edit it to match the thing you're cataloging. Certainly, there are just things you have to be careful to pay attention to. Specifically, you need to remove any record identification information. For instance, if you're using an LC record, but the thing you're cataloging is not an exact match to the record you're using, you would need to remove that LCCN number in the 010 of the MARC record, because that is specific to the manifestation that was originally cataloged, and it's not going to match what you have in hand. Or you might want to change it. But if you're using the record that exists, you're probably going to just need to remove that information. You need to edit the fixed fields to match the record you're using. Even if you don't see those fixed fields, if the user doesn't see those fixed fields, it's still going to affect searching. And so if you want the record to be searchable as the item you're cataloging, then you'll need to make sure to fix those fixed fields. And if you're not sure, this is kind of a generalization, but if you're not sure that a field matches, just go ahead and delete it. And so I was thinking specifically of things like standard numbers. If there's a number there you can't find on the item you're cataloging, probably best to just delete it off of that record, not include it in your cataloging. So those are the rules for if you're not adding your holdings to a database and you're just using a record as text, basically. If you are adding your holdings in OCLC, this is that page that I use almost every day. That's in Bibliographic Formats and Standards. It's a free source on the OCLC site. I use the whole Bibliographic Formats and Standards site all the time. I have it open all the time. I refer to it all the time in my cataloging course and tell students I still use this every day. Very, very good source of information for OCLC members and for other libraries too. The MARC information in this document is very helpful. It's OCLC specific. It's OCLC's decisions on how to use the MARC format, but it's very useful information. And this page specifically has to do with whether or not what you have in hand is a match to the record you're looking at in OCLC in the WorldCat database. And this is the link from the previous slide, goes to this. This is my basic workflow for copy cataloging. Over the years that I've been doing this is the basic idea of how I do copy cataloging. First, I search for the best match in my source of cataloging copy. I verify that match with the item in hand. Sometimes I'm cataloging from a surrogate, from just a copy of a title page and title page first, so in a last page. And so I'll just have to match as best I can with that, but usually I have the item in hand. At that point, some libraries may go ahead and add their holdings. We actually at Hillsdale do this later. We do all of our cataloging and processing and shelving, and then a couple of weeks later, we add our holdings to OCLC and to MELCAT, which is our statewide resource sharing catalog. And we do that so that our patrons have a chance to check those things out before they're made available through cooperative resource sharing programs. So we do the adding holdings later, but you might want to do it at this point. You might want to download the record at this point, especially if the database you're using charges by the amount of time you're logged in. OCLC used to do that. They don't anymore. So we do a lot more editing in OCLC now before downloading the record than we used to. But you might want to download right away and then make your changes in your own catalog. Or just copy right then if your changes can't be made in the database you're using. Then you want to make your minor edits to the record and add your local fields and then save or export the record. On the right here, this is the document that we use at Hillsdale. I don't know if you'll be able to read it too well. If you want a Word copy of this, let me know, and I'm happy to send it along to you. This, you can see down here, I don't know if I can highlight, but down at the bottom, this is a pretty old document. I created this in 2004 based on practices that we'd been using for years already at the time, but it still pretty much applies. There's no mention of the 264 here in number 3. I would need to add that if I was going to edit this, but basically it's the same thing we still do to decide whether or not we're going to use copy in OCLC for our cataloging. And this is just kind of a summary. We look to make sure that the ISBN in the 020 of the record matches what we have in hand. If it doesn't, that's something that sometimes we still will use the record, but it's something that the original cataloger decides. We make sure that the title transcription in the, okay, thanks, I will send that to Net. Make sure that the title transcription in the 245 matches. If there's a note in the record that says that the title is actually from the cover, we make sure that that is true on our item as well. Make sure that all the words are the same, with the exception of typos. We might still use a record if there's a typo. A publication statement transcription in the 260 or the 264, whichever is used in the record. Yes, I will get those out. Thank you. Thank you for your interest, everybody. Make sure that the publication statement is the same. That is kind of something that depends on the database. OCLC has some specific guidelines as to whether or not a publisher statement is a match, and that's in that same document we were just looking at. Extent statement in the 300 is a pretty important thing. You need to make sure that the thing you have has the same number of pages as the thing that was cataloged originally, and that it's the same size. We actually keep rulers at our desk to measure them. We also make sure that there's an LC call number. If you're using Dewey, you might want to make sure there's a Dewey call number. If there isn't, that's something also that has to go to the original cataloger for work. We might still use the copy, but we would have to create call numbers. 505s, that's something that our copy catalogers might add, but a record is much more usable if the 505, if needed, is already on the record. And we also check for LC subject headings, except, wow, there's a lot of interest in that document. Thank you. um, we also make sure that there are LC subject headings. Again, this is a local decision. We accept copy without subject headings for fiction, but for everything else, we need subjects, and if not, we send this to our original cataloger as well, which is me. So I try to make sure we have records so that I don't have to do that. Great, thanks, Erin. I will send it to you. All right, matching books. So I have a few slides that are specific, that are format specific for matching. The match points on books are a little bit more extensive, I think mostly because there's more cataloging for books. There are more possible matches for most books, especially in WorldCat. You're gonna find more matches. And so there are more things to check when you're trying to match your book to the record. We make sure that there's an exact match to the title and the statement of responsibility, and we base that on whatever source is specified in the note field of the record. So if it's a cover title, we make sure that the cover matches. Make sure that ISBN is the same, or we will add an ISBN if it's clearly a match, and that's something that I decide as original cataloger. We make sure that the same publisher, again, you need to see the guidelines for the shared system. Same date of publication is very important. If you're trying to match the manifestation that was cataloged to the item you have, date of publication is key to that. Same pagination and same size. And again, we actually keep rulers at our desks so that we can measure and make sure that the only caveat with size is that earlier cataloging guidelines did not have you round up, and so AACR cataloging might have rounded down. So if you had something that was 22.5 centimeters tall, that might have been transcribed as 22 centimeters. And so within a centimeter or two, the match might still hold, but bigger than that, you might have a new manifestation to catalog. CDs and DVDs, there are fewer, I have found that there are fewer match points for CDs and DVDs, just because there usually are fewer records in the database. That's not universally true, but usually you're just going to find one cataloging record for a single manifestation. So we try to match to exact title on the CD or on the container, whatever's specified as the source of information in the record. Exact match of publishers' numbers, and this is really important, and I have an example of this. But for CDs and DVDs, this is really key, that you might have something that looks exactly the same, but the number on the record is not a number that appears on the item you're cataloging. And in that case, that record just isn't a match. And the same format as well. And this is something you have to really look in the notes fields for CDs and DVDs. For DVDs especially, you have region-specific formats, and so you need to make sure that if you have something that's a Region 2 DVD, you need to make sure that the cataloging copy states that it is for a Region 2 DVD as well. Scores, there are a lot of match points for scores. And I always say that scores are not as complicated as you might think. It helps to read music, but it's not essential to catalog a score, to copy catalog a score. But there are some things you need to make sure. Again, the title needs to match. Really common in music is a caption title, a title that appears on the first page, at the top of the first page of music. That should, though, be specified in a note field. If the title on the record is from the caption, there should be a note that says caption title. So we make sure that matches. We make sure that the date matches. Again, make sure that the Plate numbers match. I'm going to show you in a minute what a plate number is. It's a very helpful match point. The publisher's number, this is a much more common match point now in current scores cataloging than the plate number. Plate numbers are kind of dying out. I'll explain that in a minute. And a lot of scores now have ISBNs too, and so that's an easy match point. Number of parts, and this is a really important thing in scores cataloging. If you're cataloging ensemble music, you'll typically have a score and a set of parts, and you need to make sure that the number of parts specified on the record matches the number of parts you have. And then exact match to key or range, and this is especially key in so to speak, in vocal music. Frequently, you'll have several manifestations, all published for different ranges. So you'll have a low voice version and a high voice version, tenor version, baritone version, etc. So that's all stuff that you need to check for the match. My examples, I think I have 3 examples today, and these were all things that were just sitting on my desk when I started creating these slides, and they turned out to be pretty good examples. This is a book that was sitting on my shelf. So I manage collection development and acquisitions as well as cataloging. So this was sitting on my shelf for replacement because it has this little tear at the top. You can see this has been sitting here for a while, and I hadn't paid much attention to it. But when I started looking at this as an example, I realized this is a perfect example of what can happen if you're not careful in matching the item you have to the cataloging record. We actually used the wrong OCLC record for this years and years ago. So this is a book from the 1970s. We probably got it around then and didn't pay that much attention. We were cataloging on cards. We might have actually edited the card to match. Uh-oh. Can anybody else hear me? Okay, good. All right. Sorry, Nancy. I hope you can come back. Okay, good. I actually got a new microphone, a new headset for this. I was hoping it wouldn't fade in and out, but it just is. I'm sorry about that. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Okay, so clearly this, and I think I have all of these highlighted. So this is a second edition. There's nothing over here that says this is a second edition. This is the record we used. The latest date of copyright is what you use as a publication date. If you're cataloging something, the latest date of copyright is considered the date of publication if there's no date of publication given. And so in this case, this clearly is a 1978 publication, and this record is for a 1970 publication. And it's 147 pages, and this record is for something that's 97 pages. So it's clearly the wrong record. But this is the record we added to our catalog and have had in our catalog. This says created in 1995. That's when we came up on innovative interfaces. And so we had this record in our catalog prior to that. It was just copied into it. And so this, this record lived for a long time in our catalog incorrectly. We didn't have this 1970 publication. We had the 1978 publication. So this was kind of misleading. If somebody was looking for this first edition, it looks like we have it both in OCLC and our own catalog, but we don't. What we have is this 1978 publication. This would be the better record. If we were going to keep this book, I would go in to delete our holdings off of the old record in OCLC and add our holdings to this record and overlay the record in our catalog with this record. Since we're withdrawing it, I'm not going to do it, but this is definitely a better match and the correct match. This is another item that was just sitting on my desk. This is it seems to be a less widely held item. When I searched for the title in OCLC, I did a what they call it, a control line search, I believe, for this title, and only found 2 matches, both from InterVarsity Press, which is this publisher, but there's still that decision, which record do you use? So there are a few things I would look at. The ISBN that appears on the book, this number that ends in 30X. I don't know, can you all see when I circle things with my cursor? Is that showing up? No, okay. I will quit bothering to circle things with my cursor. So in the 020, there's a ISBN that ends in 30X, and that appears on both records. That's the ISBN we had on the record. There are also 188 pages in the book, and that is the same on both of those records. So far, so good. But there are only 3 holdings on this record, and there are 230 holdings on this. And so having more holdings to me is a big plus for a record. That is a pro, goes in the pro column for this record for me. The dates, if you'll remember, the date on this item was copyright 1991. The only place 1992 appeared was in the cataloging and publication data. I don't think I actually showed that to you. I'm going to go back real quick. Show you that example. The cataloging and publication data here on the title page verso, there was a call number there that the Library of Congress had provided. 1992 appears there, but it doesn't appear anywhere else. It has a 1991 LCCN, first published in 1991, copyright date of 1991. So I would say that the date of publication is 1991. And this first record, there it is, used 1992 as the date of publication. The record with more holdings used 1991. And so to me, that's a big plus for this record as well. That is a good question, Nancy, and I wondered that myself. I think, well, the UK and US have different agencies that issue ISBNs. I think that's the crux of it. I really have not seen a whole lot of books where the same manifestation has both ISBNs. Usually they're 2 separate publications, maybe even 2 separate publishers. So that was kind of unusual. For our cataloging, since we're a US library, I would use the US ISBN, and that's, but you see all of those ISBNs are listed on both of these records. And this clearly identified as the UK record. That actually might be something that would be helpful, but LC has not done this. This is an LC record, and I think that's my next point. Yeah, we would choose this record. It does have all of those ISBNs, but this is an LC record. If LC does it, then we try to do it too. That's the bottom line for copy cataloging at Hillsdale College, and actually at all of the colleges where all the academic libraries where I've worked. If LC does something, we try to do the same thing. Yeah. It's a matter of standardization. If LC is doing something, if all the other libraries in the country do something, then we're all going to be doing the same thing. Just kind of, I think, best practice for American libraries. So here's my DVD example. Again, I just pulled this off of our copy cataloger shelf. I forgot to tell her I did that. I'm going to have to tell her. I borrowed this and pulled it apart a little bit. Casablanca. There are probably a whole lot of records for DVDs of Casablanca in OCLC. But this actually has an ISBN, and so it has a lot of information to use to search and to match cataloging. But so if I did and this was an ISBN search in OCLC Connection Client, I use the client version of Connection. Oh, do I keep the 1992 in the MARC tag 050? Yes, I did, Christine. Yeah. Yeah, we can go back to that real quick, actually. I think we have plenty of time. So yeah, because LC uses that call number and we accept LC's call numbers whenever possible, yeah, we keep this 1992 date in the call number. LC had already assigned that number before the book was actually published. If they stuck with it, we try to stick with it too. So there's the answer to that. Yeah, and some libraries do, and we'll change a number if it doesn't fit within our shelf list. If it's going to put the book in the wrong place on the shelf, then yeah, we'll change the LC number too. All right. Okay, so which record? How would you choose which record? Again, for me, the record with the most holdings is probably the preference. That's the record I would choose, and so I believe I didn't actually view that record, but that's the record that we use, and you can see our holdings have already been added to that record. Oh, here it is. Yeah. So this is the record we used. Oh, right, and I showed where we matched things. The UPC for AV material, I find the UPC as a really good match point to make sure that you have the same thing that was cataloged by the by the library whose copy you're using. I find that really helpful. The publisher number on DVDs can be really helpful. Make sure that this number matches what's on the record. It appears in different places on different materials, but those are some great match points for AV material. Yeah. And if I'm going to go back to that, if the UPC does not match, if this number does not match whatever, if there's a number here in the 024 and it's not the same numbers here as you see here, I would say that is not a match and you would need to do some original cataloging or find another record. And I believe that's borne out in the OCLC guidelines. All right, this is the one that I think for some catalogers would look a little scary, and in some ways it's a little scary for me too. It's a language I don't read at all. Language I had to look up to find out for sure what it was. I thought I knew, but I had to look up to be sure. There are a couple of dates here: 1983 publication date, what looks like a 1963 copyright date. But it's got a title page, it's got a caption title as well as a title on the title page. It has 28 pages on the score. The score is the piece of music that has music for all of the parts that are playing, and then it has individual parts that just have the music that individual instruments play. So it has one part, it has a score and one part. Okay, so I've outlined a few problems that you might encounter in using this. First of all, the thing is in Czech. You might not read Czech. I don't read Czech. That's a little bit of a problem. Yeah, let's just assume probably some of you do read Czech. A lot of us probably don't. Let's assume too that you don't read music. Probably a lot of you do. Maybe all of you read music. I do, but maybe you don't. A lot of catalogers don't. Maybe you don't even read music. But don't panic. Oh, uh-oh, I lost my button. You can catalog this. You really can. You do have enough information. So I'm going to show you what information you have. You know already, we've talked about the fact this is one score and one part. That's important information for copy cataloging. You have that copyright date, or what looks like a copyright date. You had that publication date from the title page. And you have your secret weapon, and this is the thing I was talking about, the plate number right there. Music cataloging, the music used to be published from metal plates, and the set of plates for music, for printing music, all had the same number, so that the publisher could keep all of those plates together. And so that was a great identification to know that this thing came from these plates. You still see it quite a bit even in music that's reproduced from old plates, if it's not even reproduced from the plates, but it's using that same image. You'll sometimes still see those plate numbers on new publications, but for older publications it's a really great match point. Great way to search for copy. And so that's what I did in OCLC, a music number search on that plate number, and got 5 hits for that. The most holdings, again, there must be a reason so many libraries use it, so I chose that record to catalog from. All right, so the things, once you've found copy and have either downloaded it or are ready to download it to your own system, the things that can and should be changed for your own catalog are the incorrect headings that are going to affect collocation. So the things that are going to put things in the wrong place in your index, headings that are incorrect. This might be something you do after the cataloging, but you do need to make sure somehow that the author heading that's on the record matches the author heading you're using in your own catalog. If you use the National Authority file, you need to make sure it's the heading that appears in the National Authority file. You need to fix transcription errors that are clearly not evidence of different edition, things that are clearly just typos. Missing and incorrect fixed fields, because the record isn't going to work correctly in your catalog if those fixed fields aren't correct. I do see my microphone going on and off. I'm not sure what that's about. Sorry about that. Incorrect call numbers, or call numbers that won't work for your library, is what that should say. I missed a word there. those should be corrected as well. And any of these, if you see major errors that are going to affect collocation, especially if you're using OCLC, and since most of us do use OCLC, if you can find the time to report those errors to OCLC, I think it's a really good thing to do for kind of for the ethics of cataloging, for the good of the rest of the users of the database. Report those errors if you can find the time. It's very hard to do in practice. I don't do it a lot myself, even though I think we should. It's hard to find the time, but it definitely would be appreciated by other libraries if you can have those errors corrected by OCLC if you're not able to correct them yourself. In my humble opinion, the things that you can leave as is in copy cataloging, make a list and then call it in later. Yes, that's a great idea, Nancy, of corrections to be made. Yes, yeah, exactly. That might be a really easy way to do it, just to make a list of, maybe even have a chart of some kind, a form that your copy catalogers can fill in. This is the record, this was the error, and maybe have somebody assigned to doing that. Maybe the copy cataloging supervisor could, on a routine basis, report those errors to OCLC. It's a good idea. I should consider that. Thank you. So I think that if you encounter an AACR record, for instance, something that's cataloged with cataloging source blank, meaning it's an AACR record, pretty old cataloging, I would say pretty much leave that as is. Leave the decisions about where the statement of responsibility is recorded, etc. Just leave that as it is. The exceptions, I think, are that you really do need those fields that are going to be used for searching purposes. The content, media, and carrier type field that are new with RDA, those 3XX fields, those are eventually going to be very important for our systems for searching and for making our content available online. And so those are things I think really do need to be added. You need to RDAize as much as possible your records to that extent. And if you can, delete the GMD. I have to admit we have not done this yet. In our catalog, we weren't sure it was going to work with Melcat, with the Melcat catalog. If we did that, there was a match point on the GMD for a while. But if you can delete it, it will make your records more up to date. But that's a local practice decision. Your library might still be using the GMD extensively, and you'll need to keep it in there. And spelling out abbreviations, I think, is important for our users. We don't need to have them understand things like SL, Latin abbreviations that meant something to us in the past, but really are not needed now with large databases where we can spell things out. We don't need those short abbreviations for card production anymore. Subject headings that you might not feel are necessary, I would say just leave in. Only delete them if they're incorrect. The same for added entries for titles and names. If they're not causing a problem, I would say just leave them in. Just saves time, might provide some additional access. An incomplete copy, how to deal with incomplete copy. What I do quite a bit, if the only record we can find that's a match is pretty incomplete, and we're not going to upgrade it in the central database, we're just going to upgrade it for our own use, I will find similar titles from which I can cut and paste and edit call numbers and subject headings. Great quick way to fix records that are a little bit incomplete. Do this a lot for contents. I'll copy, if we need a table of contents in a record that doesn't have one, especially if it's really extensive, I will find that table of contents from a publisher's website or from Amazon. I'll copy it, I'll edit in something like Microsoft Word so that I can put it in a format that will be acceptable in the MARC record, and then just paste it into the 505. You can even do replacing periods with the double dashes that are required by the standard in the 505. A lot of things you can do in a text editor that you can't do, for instance, in Connection. Copying summary notes from publishers' websites or other online sources. We don't do that a whole lot in my academic library, but I think in public libraries it's really important to include a summary note if at all possible. You just need to document where you've copied that from, using the format of the complete sentence that was copied from the source, and then the double dash and the statement of where you got that information. If you're working in a shared database, again, reporting those errors and incomplete records, if it's recommended by the organization that manages the database, and certainly OCLC does recommend that. And Library of Congress, too, I believe there are methods by which you can report errors to LC. And then for local practices and notes, and this is something every library has them. I try to keep them to a minimum so that we can accept copy as is as much as possible, but there's some things we just have to do either for the item we're receiving or just for our local users. The caveat is to not save local practice changes to a shared database. Be sure you're only saving those things on your local copy. That's why it's sometimes easiest to just download things and then make your local changes, download the copy and then make the changes. And I do see a lot of records in OCLC that have copy specific information, and that really, that if you're using a shared database, that record in the database should represent the manifestation, and then your copy specific information should be local information in the 59X fields. In OCLC, the local notes field is the 590 field. That's not a MARC standard, that's an OCLC standard. But for OCLC libraries, that's really the field to use to put copy specific information. You need to be consistent in local deviance from standard practice. So if you're doing something different than what standard practice is, you need to be consistent in applying that deviation. If you're going to use the GMD, use it consistently, use it all the time. If you're using locally used subject headings, for instance, we use the subject heading periodicals for all of our periodicals. That's not standard practice, but it's something our users have gotten used to, and so we try to always apply it for anything that's a periodical. All of this presentation is really my voice of experience, but this is kind of stuff I've developed and kind of accepted as I've gotten used to copy cataloging over the years. I do accept LC records as much as possible and edit them as little as possible. And we've had a situation lately. Cambridge University Press publishes a lot of things that are exactly the same. They publish them in paperback exactly the same as the hardback. But the paperback has something like an edition statement, says paperback edition. Technically, those probably should be treated as new manifestations and have new records. But no libraries really seem to do that, or very few libraries really seem to do that. It seems, from talking with OCLC and with other libraries, most libraries just accept that hardcover record from LC for the paperback record. And so we've started trying to do that a little bit more at Hillsdale. OCLC told us we had a much lower percentage of Library of Congress records in our database up until this summer, and I'm sure that's why, because we tried to actually match the manifestation and use a paperback record if it was a different edition, seemed to be a different edition. So we've stopped that practice a little bit to save some time and to make the records more usable. You need to make sure you have a good reason for local practice that deviates from standard practice, and you need to reevaluate those reasons regularly. Maybe you had a really good reason at one time for continuing use of the GMD, but maybe those reasons don't apply. And so it's something I know at our library we need to continue to reevaluate those local practice decisions. And don't be afraid of a small backlog. If no one's asking for it right away, my theory is it can probably wait for good copy. You might have to do some original cataloging if somebody needs something, but in most cases you can wait until there's better copy available in a copy cataloging situation. But I would say set a consistent deadline for waiting for that copy. Don't let things sit on the shelf forever waiting for somebody else to catalog it. We had a question. So the record in my bibliographic database has MARC tag 250 with first edition. Say all of our library holds the first edition. What I have in hand is second printing of the first edition. So printing basically is something you could ignore. That's pretty much standard practice. OCLC specifies that printing dates should be ignored. I believe RDA does as well. That it's pretty much standard practice that printing dates are ignored. And that is something I see in OCLC a lot, is records for later printings, when really those are just should have been treated as the same manifestation as the original printing. So printing dates generally can be ignored. The different ISBNs, that's that's where it gets a little tricky. If there is a different ISBN, maybe yes, you should treat that as a new manifestation and create a new record for it. That can be kind of a local decision. I would probably, if everything else is the same and the only difference is that printing date, I would probably just add the new ISBN to the record for the original printing. But that, again, that's a cataloger's discretion kind of decision. Oh, cosmetology titles. I would guess that there just aren't a whole lot of libraries that hold materials in cosmetology. That's a good question. I've never thought about it. Again, I've worked at academic, kind of liberal arts type academic libraries, and so I've never really had cosmetology materials in my library. I think that's probably the problem, that there just aren't a whole lot of libraries that hold that kind of material, and so you end up doing, yeah, there are tech schools that do them, but not a lot of tech schools can create records in something like OCL, so they probably don't have the resources dedicated to that kind of cataloging. So you might kind of be on your own with those materials. That's a really interesting point. And that's a case where you might, OCLC or LC might be a source for some of those. Yep, C39.50, other libraries cataloging that hasn't been put into national databases like OCLC. Again, I would just make sure that the other libraries are okay with you copying that information. Maybe just a quick email to the library, hey, you have this cataloging, can I copy it? It's exactly what I need. But that document that I linked to early in the presentation, I think would give you some guidance in how to do that and whether or not you should. But that's probably a good idea. So here's my summary list of priorities. I'm almost on time here. Feel free to keep asking questions and feel free to ask questions afterwards too. I'm going to give you my email address. So my summary list of priorities: find a true match unless you're not adding holdings to a shared system, and then feel free to copy and alter records. Choose the best match, but don't agonize over the choice. OCLs or LC records are usually very accurate, but if LC records aren't available, the most used records are probably the best records. That's a big generality, but that's usually true. Concentrate your edits on the searchable fields that affect access, the fields that aren't going to be searched, that aren't going to be prominent in the display. You probably don't need to spend your time on. Concentrate on the things that are searchable and that affect indexing. Apply local practice consistently. If you decide to add a subject heading for certain types of material, always add that subject heading. Accept cataloging according to older standards as is when it's properly identified as such in the fixed field. And so AACR cataloging has a blank in that cataloging source fixed field. AACR2 has an A. And ISBD cataloging and RDA cataloging both have the I in the cataloging source field. So that's something that, even if you don't know those standards, if the records have a code other than I in them, you can probably just accept most of those as is and not worry about them meeting RDA standards. And this is just my list of references. This is where I got some of the information that I included on some of the slides. And yes, Pam, the recording and the slides are going to be made available. I think Erin's going to shoot those out to everybody that was signed up for the webinar. So you'll be able to get access. I hear that there might have been a little bit of sound problem. I'm sorry about that. I hope it all makes sense. But please feel free. If you have questions, do not hesitate to contact me. The first address is my day job address. I'm on that email pretty much all day long. And the second address is my address at Dominican, and I try to check that a few times a day. So either one should be able to get to me. Feel free to ask questions. Give me feedback. I would love to have feedback on what you learned, what you might have added. Just mostly for my own information. And I appreciate all of you coming and having me do this. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Maureen, for a wonderful webinar. Some information and a sneak peek of what is coming up. Attendees, if you enjoyed this webinar, be sure to join us for Maureen's next 2 webinars. On Wednesday, May 24th, Maureen will be presenting on copy cataloging for music materials, and on Wednesday, July 12th, she will be presenting on accidental systems librarianship. We encourage you to look at the upcoming webinars and workshops in months ahead, and hope you're all able to join us for future training opportunities. As always, please feel free to keep checking the continuing education calendar on the Swiftland website, the Swiftland Facebook page, or look for your message from the Florida Library listserv. Thank you everyone for attending, and have a wonderful